It's tough, but it gets better. It gets better, and just hang on to that hope.
Yep, hang in there, guys.
Bailey Koch signed the mental health treatment papers on Friday. By Saturday morning, she was dead. So were her 2 teenage sons. And the man who killed them, her husband, had just come home from a psychiatric hospital days earlier. Instead of celebrating their eldest son's graduation, the Koch family was found in pools of blood on their living room floor, stabbed one by the man who claimed to love them. He didn't even give them a chance to say their last words. What went so horribly wrong in a home filled with prayers, Facebook posts, and desperate hope? And why didn't anyone stop him? This is the heartbreaking story of Jeremy Koch. The plan was simple. Bailey would help Hudson with his tie, Jeremy would pack the car. Asher, the young one, would joke about how weird it was seeing his big brother in a cap and gown. It was supposed to be graduation day, and instead it became a massacre. At 9:45 a.m. on May 10th, 2025, police in Johnson Lake, Nebraska were called to the Koch family's lakeside home. Inside, they found all 4 members of the family, Bailey, Jeremy, Hudson, and Asher, dead from stab wounds. A single kitchen knife was recovered from the scene, but it wasn't the police who made the discovery. It was Bailey's parents. Her father, Lane Kugler, opened the door expecting hugs, tears of pride, maybe a photo or 2 before the big ceremony. What he saw instead, he said, will haunt me for the rest of my life. 41-year-old Bailey was a special education teacher. She was kind and supportive, well beyond what's expected of a human being. Hudson Koch was 18. He had big plans. He had been accepted into a 3-year apprenticeship in California. He was going to leave Nebraska behind and build something new, something solid, something his. Asher, his 16-year-old brother, was the baby of the family, a natural athlete, a rock star on the golf course, and a goofball in the kitchen. His friend said he had sharp wit and a loyal heart. He looked up to Hudson and followed him like a shadow. Both brothers were proud of themselves and of each other, and their mom couldn't stop talking about them. Now they were all gone, including their 42-year-old father. He had taken their lives and then turned the knife on himself. In the town of Cozad, Nebraska, they weren't ready for this kind of grief. One moment, teachers were preparing for graduation, and the next, they were rewriting the entire ceremony. That's not a tearjerker sentence, that's what actually happened. Cozad High's superintendent stood before the crowd that evening and said what no principal should ever have to say. This senior class has experienced a tragedy within the past few hours. No names, no details, just a quiet shared understanding. Hudson Koch should have been sitting among them. Now a funeral was being planned in his name. And no one, not his friends, not his coaches, not even his grandparents, could understand how it had all unraveled so fast. Bailey had already seen the knife once. Back in May, she woke up to Jeremy standing over her in the dark, blade in hand, blank stare. Life flashed before Bailey's eyes, and then she decided to talk him down. She made him promise to check himself in, and then she forgave him. Maybe that should have been it, a full stop moment, a siren blaring. This man cannot be at home. Instead, it was just a footnote in a much longer story, because Jeremy Koch wasn't a monster. He was a man unraveling in slow motion, and Bailey, God bless her, was holding the thread.
A little over 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with severe depression in June of 2009.
She went public with everything. She started a Facebook page called Anchoring Hope for Mental Health, chronicling Jeremy's battle with depression and suicidal thoughts. She admitted things most people hid in shame, that her husband had tried to kill himself before, and that he was becoming someone she didn't recognize, and that the healthcare system was failing them. She even wrote in a now deleted GoFundMe, "My husband tries to kill himself a lot. I have no pride left. Mental illness is taking my husband from me." And still the family stayed together.
Just remember those 3 main pieces to the puzzle: a support system of some type, acceptance of help from a support system, medication, which is extremely important to stay on and follow your doctor's recommendations.
She didn't just beg for help, she documented it. Hospital visits, psychiatric evaluations, electroconvulsive therapy. By the time May rolled around, Jeremy had been officially diagnosed with failure to thrive. He was dehydrated, malnourished, and teetering on the edge of psychosis. But after a brief inpatient stay, they sent him home. No 24-hour supervision, no extended observation, deprivation, just a man with documented history of self-removal ideation, hallucinations, and one terrifying night with a knife back in the arms of the family he'd nearly hurt. 3 days later, he killed them all. The signs were there, the cries for help were public, and no one, not the doctors, not the system, not even the well-meaning community who offered prayers, stopped the spiral. Bailey Koch didn't hide, nor did she sugarcoat it. She was never the type to say awesome when people asked how she was. This is mental illness, she wrote just days before her death. A roller coaster of ups, downs, hope, and no hope. She knew the stakes. She was a teacher, a mother, a wife, but more than that, she was a full-time caregiver to a man slowly losing his grip on reality. And she loved him fiercely. She believed Jeremy could get better. She clung to their shared faith, posting videos about how God had brought them through hard seasons before. She talked about hope like it was medicine, and maybe for her it was.
It's tough, but it gets better. It gets better, and just hang on to that hope.
Yep, hang in there, guys.
In one bittersweet video, Bailey laughed about how she was the one feeling low that month, while Jeremy seemed better than he had been in years.
God never puts us at the same place at the same time.
Thankfully.
But even then, her voice wavered, because Bailey was tired. Caregiver fatigue isn't just real, it's dangerous. When the person you love is slipping and the system keeps shoving the weight back on you, something breaks. On May 8th, she posted that Jeremy had been released from inpatient care. She was hopeful, maybe too hopeful. She even said she was glad he'd be home in time for Hudson's graduation. 1 day later, she admitted he had another setback. Still, she signed the paperwork for new treatment, transcranial magnetic stimulation. One last shot at turning the tide. She never got to see if it worked. The next morning, the knife came out again, but this time there was no talking him down. Bailey died trying to save him, not from the police or from judgment, but from himself. And in the end, it wasn't enough, because hope is powerful, but untreated psychosis is stronger. When Jeremy Koch came home, he was supposed to be better. The doctors had discharged him just 3 days before the murders. He'd undergone treatment, he'd been observed. On paper, he was stable enough to return home. But paper doesn't bleed, and paper doesn't scream when it's being stabbed. Bailey welcomed that hospital discharge, because despite everything, she still believed her husband could recover. But something had changed in Jeremy. The man Bailey had once described as loving and faithful had become vacant, unrecognizable, and hollow-eyed. After his electroconvulsive therapy ended in April, she said he was a shell of himself. Medical staff described him as in a state of failure to thrive. That's a diagnosis we usually hear about infants or the elderly, not a 42-year-old father of two. So what went wrong? The deeper question haunting everyone now isn't why he did it, but what was driving him? Was he simply depressed, or had something darker taken hold of his mind? Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bobber, who analyzed the case, didn't hesitate to call it what it likely was: psychosis. This wasn't just extreme sadness, this was someone who had, in all likelihood, detached from reality. Someone who may have believed in a delusional haze that the only way to save his family was to end them.
Maybe he felt like he had failed them in some way, and that the only thing he could do was take them with him and leave this world, because he felt such feelings of inadequacy.
It sounds horrifying. It is. But psychosis is like that. It whispers twisted truths into a mind already breaking. And when that mind is released from care too early, placed back into the environment it was pulled from, and given no buffer, no supervision, no check-ins, no waiting period, it becomes a bomb waiting to go off. And still people ask, was this murder? Was Jeremy evil? The answer isn't simple. It never is when mental illness and violence collide. But here's what we do know. Most people with mental illness are not violent. In fact, they're far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. However, when mental illness reaches certain extremes, especially with features like delusions, paranoia, or rage-filled hallucinations, the risk of harm skyrockets, especially when that person feels like they're backed into a corner, has access to weapons, and no longer sees themselves as having a future. Dr. Bobber said it plainly.
So when we're talking about a knife, we're talking about intimacy and emotional proximity. What it takes to get that up close and personal with someone it has a very angry feeling to it, right? Like intense emotions.
And maybe in Jeremy's mind, something necessary. That's what makes this so chilling. Because it wasn't just a slip, it was a sickness so complete, so consuming, it convinced a man that people he loved most in the world were better off dead. Maybe he believed he was rescuing them, or maybe he felt like a failure in some twisted way.
For example, jealousy, betrayal, hopelessness, and a loss of control. Was this someone who felt inadequate as a father and a husband? Were there financial problems?
Maybe it wasn't so much sadness as it was rage.
So the knife to me has a particular significance. It almost has a feeling of him punishing them in some way. Projected feelings of rage and asserting dominance over them.
After all, it takes a special kind of person to think that they get to decide who lives and who dies. Still, whatever his reasoning, they're gone, and he's not here to answer for it.
A murder-suicide that left a family of 4 dead and their friends and family looking back at a difficult mental health journey that ended in the worst way.
The official cause of death for all 4 family members was fatal knife wounds. Police found the murder weapon at the scene, a kitchen knife, slick with blood, its handle still warm. They also found Jeremy's body. Unlike many murder-suicides where the killer uses a firearm to distance themselves, Jeremy Koch died in the same way he killed, by the blade. Slow, messy, and intimate. There were no screams reported, no neighbors heard any commotion. It was as if the house just went quiet until Bailey's parents showed up. Her father, Lane, and her mother, Peggy, had come to pick the family up for graduation. They were gonna help with photos, maybe take the boys out to lunch after the ceremony. What they walked into instead was a scene that will haunt them forever. Lane now says it was not Jeremy who did this. It was a diseased mind. Graduation at Cozad High still went forward that day, but it wasn't a celebration, it was a shell. Superintendent Dr. Dan Endorf didn't say Hudson's name directly, but his absence swallowed the room. In a packed gymnasium filled with caps, gowns, and forced smiles, there was one chair that stayed heartbreakingly empty. People cried. Some stood in silence, some clapped through tears, and nobody could make any sense of it. How could someone come home from a hospital supposedly stabilized and then kill his entire family? How did a morning meant for hugs, flowers, and proud tears turn into a massacre? How did no one stop it? And why do we always ask these questions after the bodies are found? Now the internet keeps repeating the same idea. Jeremy Koch should have never been home. Not after March, not after the knife, not after Bailey woke up and found her husband looming over her with a blank face and a weapon in his hand. That moment alone should have set off every alarm. And to Bailey's credit, it did. She got him into treatment. She told the truth online. She waved the red flags with both hands, screaming for help in full view of the public. But the system didn't answer with urgency. It answered with protocols, with polite handoffs, with discharge plans that looked fine on paper but didn't include the one thing that might have saved this family: real oversight. Jeremy was admitted to the hospital again in early May. He was malnourished, dehydrated, emotionally unresponsive. The doctors described it as a full-blown mental health crisis and slapped on a diagnosis of failure to thrive. Then, 3 days later, just 3, they sent him home. Dr. Daniel Bober explained it like this: hospitals aren't designed to fix you. They're designed to stabilize you.
You know, mental health facilities are trying to get people stable to the point where they can go to outpatient treatment or they can step down to a lower level of care.
Once a patient is no longer considered immediate threat to self or others, they're usually discharged with referrals. They're expected to follow up on treatments, manage their needs, and reintegrate into daily life, often with zero direct supervision. In Jeremy's case, they might have thought he was calm enough to manage. Maybe he even smiled. Maybe he told them what they needed to hear. Because here's the truth. patients can lie. Doctors are rarely mind readers, and if there isn't someone close to them screaming, "He's not okay," the system listens to the patient over the context. And Bailey, she had been that voice, but the doctors picked up on her hope and they released him. No mandatory check-ins, no crisis team visit, no one checking whether the house had sharp objects or whether the kids were safe. Just a fragile man, returning to the same place where his mind had broken, and this time with nothing left in the way. When Bailey wrote, "I have no pride left," she wasn't being poetic. She was being literal. She had got past the point of worry, past shame, past silence. She had laid everything bare and begged for help. But when help is slow, when beds are full, when insurance doesn't cover longer stays, you get outcomes like this. And people who survive, the parents, the neighbors, the teachers, are left wondering why a man so clearly unwell was given a green light to walk back into his family's life with nothing but a piece of paper saying, "He's okay now." Bailey's parents wrote, "The country is in crisis because there is far too little help available to tackle the mental illness crisis. Fund research, build facilities, help people. We can make a difference." Bailey believed that with all of her heart. We can help our fellow human beings. Don't give up. Bailey didn't, right up until her last breath. Bailey Koch was in love. It wasn't some storybook thing. It wasn't shiny or easy. It was heavy and complicated. The kind of love that survives things it probably shouldn't. Jeremy had been diagnosed with severe depression back in 2009. For nearly 2 decades, Bailey stood beside him through breakdowns and multiple self-removal attempts. She didn't walk away. Instead, she became everything. His nurse, his protector, his cheerleader, his last line of defense. And that's what no one wants to talk about. How love can make you stay even when it's not safe anymore. Bailey posted videos where she joked through exhaustion, where she smiled beside Jeremy even as her eyes gave her away. It's amazing that we're never both down at the same time. That's God. But anyone who's ever been in a codependent relationship knows that's not balance. That's burnout with a bow on top. What Bailey had wasn't just hope. It was trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is what happens when a caregiver becomes emotionally entangled with the person they're trying to rescue. So much so that they lose sight of what's safe, what's sustainable, and what's slowly killing them. Bailey loved Jeremy. She wanted to believe in the version of him that once brought her flowers or read scripture with the kids or held her hand during the hard nights. She needed to believe that man could come back. And it's easy to say she should have left, but leaving isn't just a decision, it's a detachment. And for women like Bailey, strong, hopeful, deeply religious, leaving meant failure, abandonment, breaking the family apart when she was still convinced it could be healed. So instead of running, she reached deeper with fundraisers and mental health awareness videos. Bailey wasn't naive, she was just overwhelmed. Because loving someone who's mentally ill, really loving them through it, isn't a feel-good movie montage. It's sleepless nights, locked doors, begging the system for help while pretending to the kids that everything's fine. It kind of is a silent hell, and it wears you down until the extraordinary becomes normal. Until waking up to a man with a knife feels like just another low point. Until survival feels like a Tuesday. She wanted to protect her kids, but she also wanted to protect their father, and that impossible choice killed them all. When a tragedy strikes a family, it leaves a crater. But when a father kills his wife and sons the morning of his oldest boy's graduation, the shockwaves level an entire town. Cozad, Nebraska was not prepared for this. Small towns never are. This is the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, where kids ride bikes through neighborhoods lined with flags and flower beds, where everyone shows up to graduation, even if it's not their kid walking on the stage. On May 10th, that stage felt more like an altar. Hudson Koch's chair sat empty. His name was printed in the program, but when the other seniors stood for photos, Hudson's absence was like a scream in a silent room. Later that day, the photos of the ceremony went online. In between the smiling faces and tossed caps were comments like, "Praying for the Koch family, gone far too soon, Hudson, we love you." But there were no words for it, really. How do you grieve a mother and 2 children, knowing their last moments moments were stolen by the very man who once tucked them in at night. Holdridge Public Schools, where Bailey taught special education, opened their doors for students and teachers to come and sit together. They didn't issue a press release, they ordered coffee and hugs. Because in moments like this, there is nothing to say, only things to feel. Friends of the Koch boys posted throwback photos, golf tournaments, birthday parties, inside jokes no outsider could understand. One of Asher's teammates left a single T at the school's flagpole with the note, "Still your favorite foursome." Bailey's parents, Lane and Peggy, stepped into the role no parent ever wants. Survivors, witnesses, the ones left behind to bury the people they love most. Lane's Facebook post tore through the internet like a wound. "What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life." Jeremy had been fighting mental illness for many, many years. His depression had turned into psychosis. It was not Jeremy who committed this horrific act. It was a sick mind. That one sentence became the anchor of the community's mourning. It was a sick mind. Some people blamed Jeremy, others blamed the system. Some blamed no one because blaming doesn't bring the dead back. Jeremy's therapist, Stacey Cahill, wrote, "I'm angry that people are taking the story and twisting it and blaming Jeremy and Bailey, or mental health practitioners, or people who should have, would have, could have done something, because I feel like that is based out of fear. And Jeremy and Bailey's mission was based on love and taking shame away from mental illness." Still, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a murder-suicide. It was the fallout of a broken mental health structure crashing into a family that tried everything to survive. The Cuglers have vowed to continue Bailey's mission, to advocate for real, responsive mental health care, not just thoughts and prayers. They believe Bailey would want that. And maybe if someone listens, it might stop the next tragedy before it starts. In rural Nebraska, where mental health resources are scarce and self-removal rates remain higher than urban areas, their fight already matters. Just 1 month after the murders, Bailey's Facebook page has gained thousands of new followers, and people across the state are signing up for suicide prevention training, sharing their stories, and saying, finally, they don't feel so alone. Bailey's voice, once dismissed as just a mom blogging, is now sparking statewide change. Even in death, she's making sure no one else slips through the cracks. The truth is brutal. This wasn't unpredictable. It wasn't one of those "we never saw it coming" cases. Bailey saw it coming. She even told the world, and still no one stopped it. So now we ask, can this kind of tragedy ever really be prevented? Experts say maybe, not always, but maybe we can lower the odds. It starts with follow-through, not just stabilizing a patient, but monitoring them after discharge, checking in, removing dangerous objects from the home, involving the whole family in the safety plan, not just handing them the burden and hoping for the best. Mental health care shouldn't end when the hospital doors swing open. It should begin there. Jeremy Koch was showing signs of psychosis. He was underweight, dehydrated, and unstable. His wife had already reported a violent incident, and yet, when it came time to discharge him, there was no mandatory post-hospital wraparound, just crossed fingers and blind faith. That's what has to change. Families cannot be left alone with that kind of weight. And sick minds, no matter how loved they are, can turn fatal if left untreated. So now I turn to you. Should Jeremy Koch have been forcibly institutionalized longer, even if he said he felt better? Was Bailey right to stay and fight for him? Or should she have walked away the moment he pulled the knife in March? And if you were the doctor, would you have sent him home? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and this community deserves a real, open conversation about what it means to love someone who's falling apart and where we draw the line between hope and danger. If this story moved you, then don't go silent now. Like the video, subscribe to Anna Solves, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next case that everyone else will ignore until it's too late. I'll see you in the next one, and stay safe.